is Patrick Christensen. I'm what we call a land use attorney. I help developers, business owners with everything from zoning changes to Board of Adjustment variances, Historic Design Review Commission approvals, any kind of discretionary approval with the city or with the county. And I thought, probably the one thing everyone has heard about is zoning. We all know there's zoning out there, but just what does zoning really mean? Well, if you live in a city in Bexar County, they all have zoning regulations. And so if you live in a single-family home, it's most likely you have single-family zoning, which the city has as R4, 5, 6. If you live in an apartment, it's MF zoning, multifamily zoning. And if you're a business, it's probably C, commercial. But I wanted to kind of show you, one of the most important things if you're looking to lease a new space or buy a new property, what is the zoning? So I wanted to show you, and I'm getting up to go to my screen here. I wanted to show you, it's real easy to check your zoning without having to call someone like me. You basically just go to the City of San Antonio webpage. You go to development. If you click on government, it'll have city departments. You click on development services. This is the development services homepage. And you click right here for the one-stop map. If you could just go to the next screen, please. When you click on that, it's going to pull this up. And it starts out with the whole city, but you can zoom in, drag it, and try to find your property. I thought this was a good example, and please let me know if I'm getting close to the end of my time. This was a good example because it showed a lot of different zoning. This is over by the Pearl. R6 is single family. The C3 and A is commercial. C3 is a very intense commercial, allows everything from used car lot to a bar to normal retail and restaurants. But the NA means no alcohol sales on that property. IDZ is called infill development zone. If you're inside Loop 410, you're entitled to IDZ zoning. IDZ releases you from a lot of setbacks. It eases the parking requirements, things like that. So it's a lot of the new apartments and things you see downtown, mixed-use projects, they all have IDZ zoning. If you can go to the next slide, please. And on that same development services site, you can go to the UDC, which stands for Unified Development Code, which is sort of the building permit regulations for the city of San Antonio. You can go to section 35311, and these are the use regulations. So if you what your property is zoned, it's like, well, can I do what I need to do? It has a non-residential use matrix table where you can look something up. Alcohol, bar, tavern. I'm zone C3. This is with cover charge 3 more days a week. Special use permit. If you're not going to have cover charge more than 3 days per week, it is allowed in C3. You can go to the next slide, please. And this is just another example, food service establishment, exterminator, furniture, upholstering, you can kind of cross-analyze, what is allowed for that. And now, if you don't have the correct zoning, you have to file a zoning change application, and you have to submit that to the city, and they will send you to the zoning commission for a recommendation, and then you'll ultimately go to city council for final approval. And that's the zoning process. And then the next slide, real quick, please. I wanted to say, if you're purchasing a property that does not have a building, you need to check the zoning, and you also need to check to see if it's platted. This is just an example of a plat. If it's not platted, that's kind of an expensive process. You have to get it platted. That's probably about $40,000 with an engineer. It's complicated because the plat's going to require a drainage study, traffic study, things like that. And that's sort of the super high-level zoning land use kind of requirements for a property. And if you have the correct zoning, everything, you down to the city and you get a building permit. And I believe my friends here are going to talk about that a little bit later. Thank you.
Yes, great. Well, thanks so much for having me. Great to be here. And building on what Patrick has just talked about, one important thing, I'm going to look specifically at commercial leases, but I'm also going to talk a little bit about zoning. We're trying to give you a step-by-step process, really, how to think about things, or at least a framework or a guideline. So the first thing to look at is the zoning, what Patrick's just been over, and you can do a lot of that research yourself. The time to bring in a land use attorney is when it's not clear cut. If it's a very big project, you want to definitely employ a land use attorney that's very well versed in these processes as soon as possible. And I think it's very important to use your consultants when you can. Also, it's important to have a commercial real estate broker who knows about zoning, who knows about leases. This is not the time to throw your niece or nephew or aunt and uncle who's kind of a weekend warrior realtor a bone if they're not familiar with commercial leasing as well as zoning, because the first step is you look at the zoning and you make sure that you can do what you want to do in that zoning. And in Patrick's slide, the P on the land use matrix stood for permitted. The S stands for a special use permit. So that's a whole nother process, which we don't have time to talk about today. But Patrick said, well, if you don't have the zoning, then you can go through the process to rezone. And so you have to kind of ask yourself a question at that point. Is this going to be an easy rezoning? And the joke to the answer is really, the joke answer is there is no such thing as an easy rezoning. So if you have to go through that process, you definitely have to weigh that in. If that site is going to be suitable and if it's worth going through the effort to do that. If not, then you just go and you look for another site that's going to have the correct zoning already in place. But one thing you want to do also, I think, is, and this is just standard practice, before you start putting a lot of time and effort and paying people to do work for you, you want to get control of the property, but you also want to protect yourself. But you want to get control of the property because you don't want to spend a month talking with Patrick, talking with me, talking with development services. That's kind of the 1, 2, 3, zoning, get control, and then talk about it with the city to get the right permits. But you don't want to go through that process unless you're sure, or at least you've got control of the property. So once you get all the answers and you've got all the I's dotted and the T's crossed, you're going to be able to actually execute, because you could go off and do all this on this particular site that you've picked, but you don't have control of the property. And you come back to the landlord 30 days later and say, hey, great, I can do this great idea that we talked about a month ago. Landlord says, sorry, I leased the property already, I wasn't sure. So now you're back to the drawing board, back to square one. Maybe you've learned something through the process, but you might also be really sad because you had a site that you really thought was going to be a viable and profitable option, and now you've put all this time and effort in, and now you've got to go and start all over again. So instead of going that route and leaving things to chance, once you've done a little preliminary due diligence of looking at the zoning, making sure what you think you can do there, then you want to get control of the property. And there's 2 ways to do that. One is you execute an option agreement with the landlord. And that option agreement basically gives you, let's say 30 days, 60 days, 90 days. Now you have to pay for this option period, but it's money well spent because it allows you to control the property, to tie it up while you go and get all the I's dotted and the T's crossed for what your idea is. So when the option period's over, you execute the lease. You've already agreed on the lease terms during the option before you sign the option period, so you know what you're getting into, but you have control of the property. If you're not able to do that, or if you want to give yourself an extra level of defense, because some of these leases are 5-year leases at, let's say, $6,000 a month. Well, I think that works out to 6 times 12, $72,000 a year times 5. You're pretty close to $400,000 right there. So you don't want to take these leases frivolously. You want to make sure that you're protected. So the first thing you can do is get an option. The second thing you can do is look at a commercial lease, and I've got it up on the screen right now. I've got the table of contents up there, and I'm going to specifically talk about pages 13 and 14. So next slide, please. So on every commercial lease, I gave you a copy of the table of contents to look at, and members of the audience have hard copies of that. If you don't, they are on the table as you came in. There's on page 14, there's something called special provisions. Now, I wrote a draft. You want to kind of use language something like this. This is just for illustrative purposes, but I wanted to kind of give you an idea that you could write something into the special provisions that give you an extra level of protection, something like this that says, subject to the approval of intended use of X, which might be a restaurant or a bar or a used car lot, by the City of San Antonio and or Fire Marshal, as evidenced by initial issuance of a certificate of occupancy by said regulatory authorities. Now, hopefully the landlord's going to sign off on this, but he or she might not. But that does give you a point to start negotiations, because you could say, look, I'll pay the rent, but if we don't, we can amend this. If we don't get our certificate of occupancy, the deal's off. Or at least this gives you some kind of leg to stand on if it comes to that. The other thing that I talked about with Gabriella is sometimes you sign a lease and then something pops up that you didn't really expect. And one of those things that's kind of very expensive is a health and safety issue. If the fire marshal or the city of San Antonio deems that the space needs to have sprinklers, fire suppression system, well, it's not clear exactly who's going to pay for that sometimes in the lease. So, and that could be very expensive, somewhere, maybe over $100,000, and that might not be something that you thought that you had to pay. And if you don't pay it, you still might be locked into the lease. So what we're trying to do is give you a couple of options. It's standard business practice. Every landlord should understand that you have to be able to run your due diligence. You have to pay a fee for that, whether you have an option or you have some earnest money or you have both. You have to be prepared to walk away from those things, but it does give you a level of protection so you're not locked into something that you can't execute your idea from. So the three-step process easily is look at the zoning yourself, get control of the property, and then the third, and I'll pass it off to my colleague next to me, is Jeremy's department about building permits. Thank you.
Thank you, Andrew, and Patrick. I didn't know that there are real estate agents that go out there and they actually put that special provision in there. So that's really, really interesting. On our perspective, we see sometimes where applications come in for a certificate of occupancy or a new building, and they didn't do the research up front, and now they're stuck with the land use that's not allowed for that, or a business that's not allowed in that land use. And so once you have come through and talked with Patrick or with our zoning team as well, and you've gone through the real estate portions of it, we come in and you either apply for a certificate of occupancy if it's an existing space, and what we recommend is if you can find a space that already had the existing use for your new business. That makes things a lot smoother because sometimes you can just take over that certificate of occupancy and keep rolling. If it does not, then you apply for a certificate of occupancy. We verify that the land use permits, or the land zone permits the use. From there, you'll have inspections. You'll have 5 specific inspections, and we'll get to those a little bit later with fire. But in general, you'll have building, electrical, mechanical, plumbing, fire, health, the general inspections that you'll have depending on the business that you want to do. From there, you'll get your certificate of occupancy. Now, that's the straightforward. There's an existing building. This was, a straightforward process. If you have to come in and you're developing land after you speak with land development, you've already platted your property, you have the proper zoning, then you can do something called a new building permit or a remodel of a space. From there, there's a whole other set of rules that we can get into as what's required for that. But what I'd like to do is send over some information to the event coordinators so that way we can kind of walk you through that process. But in general, it's the same things. You're going to submit your documents, your plans, the required items that we look for on plan review. And then you're going to go through and once you pass the plan review items, you'll start your inspections. And from the inspection process, we can get you the certificate of occupancy. But aside from that, overall, in general, development services encompasses all of these things. We go from land development to building permits to plan review to code enforcement. We have a consultation team here that's a free service. Myself, I'm the supervisor for it. I have another member of the team here with us as well, Radio in the back. And we have a free service. You can come on in, discuss your project. You can start with us, and we can kind of guide you through what is required for your specific building permit, your specific zone and address. A lot of times we do pass it off to our zoning team, but again, we can kind of walk you through and guide you through what you need in general. We have a lot of customers that come in for projects that are in process or haven't started yet, so we kind of have that experience to walk you through what may be required.
Okay, thank you. And then we have our next speaker, who's going to be the Bexar County Fire Marshal, because there's different entities, and so I'm so happy that we were able to bring so many different people from the different parts of the puzzle here.
Good evening. My name is Sergeant David Boudreau with the Bexar County Fire Marshal's Office. We pretty much do the same thing the city does. However, we only do this in unincorporated Bexar County. We don't go inside the city limits of San Antonio, any of the other small cities, Church, Selma, Cibolo, Somerset. We don't have any authority in those unless called upon by the mayor. We do the building permits from the ground up. If you have a piece of property you want to develop out in the county, first thing you need to go do is go through Bexar County Public Works. They do a platting, on-site sewage facilities, right-of-way, and floodplain. You have to meet all their criteria, and a lot of that comes to the city for them to check off on a lot of that stuff, a lot of the information. Once you have a signed building permit authorization, then the building plans and everything come to our office. We have plan reviewers, we have code inspectors. We go out and do all the inspections, and if everything passes, we give you a certificate of occupancy. A lot of what we're running into right now is we have a lot of shell buildings that are being built in the county, and they're leasing out the shell spaces to you guys. If it's an unfinished shell space, you'll have to come in and get a change of occupancy permit or an interior finish out permit. It depends on what it is. If there's nothing in there, it'd be the interior finish out, and do the same thing, the permits, the inspections, certificate of occupancy. If you already have one that's finished out, say a white box that's got the sheetrock and stuff like that, that will be a change of occupancy. Come in, do the same thing, come in, pay the fee. We'll go out and we'll inspect and see what's there. We'll tell you what you need, and then once you get everything done, we'll go back and do a final inspection, issue a certificate of occupancy. One issue like he brought up is we do have some that want to go open a restaurant in a shell space that is not sprinkled. If you have a restaurant that has an occupant load of 100 or more in unincorporated Bexar County, it requires a fire sprinkler system. And I know we've had a couple that unfortunately it didn't work out. Well, you guys paid the landowner for a lease, and now they can't break it. There is, and I'll put some flyers back here in the back, Bexar County Dispute Resolution Center. They do landlord-tenant disputes. If you have anything like that, we do not get involved in them. We only strictly with what's by the code. We don't take the landlord side. We don't take the tenant side. We can't do that. A lot of other ones we do, mobile food, if you're going to do a mobile food truck, or if you're going to open a mobile food truck park, all those trucks have to be permitted. We do fireworks. We do foster home, foster group homes. We have to do a whole gamut. Our website that's easy to navigate through is www.bear.org/FM. And on that website, the first page on the left-hand side, there's a frequently asked questions tab. That has a lot of answers that some of you might be looking for. But like I said, again, we're only in unincorporated Bexar County.
Hey, my name's Kelly Turner. Like everybody just said, we're inside the city limits. Bexar County is outside city limits to the county edge. I'm going to repeat a lot of things that Mr. Boudreau and Jeremy have said already. Yeah, let me just read down your list. Pretty much we're in the C of O inspections as well. We're looking, if it's a real simple C of O, fire extinguishers, we're looking for emergency and exit lighting, and your address, real basic things when we come out there. Now, if you're doing anything that's change of use or it's never been used as a restaurant before, we may require that you get a hood suppression system, which is, it costs a lot of money if you're starting a restaurant, and that's one you didn't anticipate. You need to consider that before you move into that space. So other things that we have been talked about, fire alarms, fire sprinklers, underground fire lines. Those could be, if you're building out a new space, those are all considerations that you may have to consider. Now, if you're starting a very small business, some of our annual permits that you may encounter if you're starting a group home, adult care, child care, if you're doing a bar or tavern, those are all annual permits that we require you get a permit from us. If you do any kind of storage of hazardous chemicals, hazardous materials, that's also a permit that we require if it's over 60 gallons. Sometimes you don't realize that you have a hazardous material until the fire department shows up and says, yeah, that's on the list. So that's a big one right now that we're catching. a lot of smaller businesses do have hazardous materials on site. Right now, all of our information is just like the county. It's on our city website. Our current code is the 2018 International Fire Code. We're moving to the 2021 code. Not too many changes, but there are a few. So just be aware of that. I guess in the next couple of months, we're going to be moving to that new code. Really, that's it for me, because everything else has been said.
We are also moving to the 2021 International Fire Code, hopefully in January. But what we've been doing is sitting with the code development processes and try to see if we can get our code as close as we can as the city. Not a lot of 15, we're on the 9, so we're trying to stay up with them. I'm trying to make it easier for you guys to understand, okay, well, the city does this, but the county does this. There are certain things we just cannot do that the city can. So we're diligently working with the city and trying to get the codes as close as we can.
Howdy and good evening, everyone. I'm Ricky De Leon. I'm manager at CPS Energy and Community Engagement. I originally started off my tenure there at CPS Energy as a temporary and digging ditches, and came on up through construction, and that led me to the engineering side, where I worked hand in hand with a lot of this permitting stuff, from residential all the way into small commercial. So I definitely look forward to answering some of your questions on the Q&A session, but I know that permits happens to be a big sticking point. And the common thread that everybody here on the panel said is do your due diligence, do your research. The city has great information as well as a county. There's certain key websites that you really want to go. There's a city one-stop map that you go in there, and if you're not hip to GIS and all that other stuff, partner up with someone that can kind of walk you through there. Look up the address that you're potentially going to buy, and what that does is that'll actually tell you if whether it's in the COSA city limit or not, and that's going to just start your direction into where exactly maybe I need to look into a licensed plumber, licensed electrician, and whatnot. And there could be where there's other unincorporated areas such as Benormi, Sandy Oaks. There's other areas, Somerset, and stuff like that. So that's called what we call an extraterritorial jurisdiction. And its rule of thumb is it's probably about 5 miles outside of 1604. Now that's when it gets tricky, right? Because if you live in an ETJ, or excuse me, if you're running a business in the ETJ, extraterritorial jurisdiction, then that you fall into a different set of parameters, like the fire chief over here mentioned. When you do open that business and stuff, you're going to be required floodplain permits. It has to be either a legally recorded plat, so that's very important. It has to be a legally recorded plat. We can't even meet. The designer cannot even go out in the field and meet with someone until you have a legally recorded plat, and then we can go forward with conversations. The last thing we want to do is give somebody a hope and go out there and say, oh yeah, we could put a pole here, transformer here, and then we'll get your service, and then you start building a building and it's in a floodplain, or you can't get it platted or whatnot, then you just made that big old expense and for nothing. So do your due diligence. That city one-stop map, the BCAD, Bexar County Appraisal District, definitely go on there, research the property. When you do research that property, there's kind of when you get the legal description of the property, if it has L equals plat, right? So it'll if you have like a CB 506 whatever XYZ, right? That's going to tell you that it's actually a county block, that it has not been platted yet. So make sure that when you do get your loans or construction loans or investors or whatnot, that you do account for that platting process, because that is a significant amount, right? And that's before you even get utilities. Also, our website, right? Our website has a lot of helpful information on there, not only on the new construction side, but also with my current business area is the energy to business, right? So if you do have for example, if you take over an existing business or existing building, we have plenty of services out there, from HVAC tune-ups to retrofitting some lights and all kinds of rebates, modified budget payment plans. We definitely can help you out. But on the permitting side, due diligence is the most important thing. And then, of course, always take into account the not only internal but external permits that are going to be required for construction. Right, so internal permits, you're looking at plumbing permit, electric permit, plumbing for your gas, electric of course for your electric. If you're doing a remodel, you're going to be required a work with permit, and that work with permit, your electrician has to get it coordinate through engineering. So you can always reach customer engineering at 210-353-4050. That is a gatekeeper for any kind of construction concerns or projects. If you want to add another suite, if you need to change suites, that 50 number will get you to the engineering and make sure that we'll start off with addressing. Right, they'll set up your BCA, what we call a business case. Right, they'll give you a particular number, assign it to a designer. Designer will contact you, and then you start moving forward through the process. Right. And when I talk about internal and external permits, external would be your plumber, your septic tank guy if you're in an unincorporated Bexar County, and if you're not tied to some kind of water system, then you're going to have a septic, right? Any kind of septic questions, you could definitely reach out to Mr. Mike Latta. He's there at Bexar County. His phone number is 210-335-0295. So if you have any septic questions, you definitely reach out to him. We work hand in hand with Bexar County and also with the city. There's different things that are going to be needed for Bexar County. Again, to open your business, to get that meter set, to get that gas meter set, electric meter set. We cannot do anything until we get it released by Bexar County Fire. And on the city, there's a lot of different issues with the city permits, right? So they just switched to an Excel system, and so if there's pending permits before in the old system, we're not going to see them. They have to be re-entered into the new system. So that's all done here at DSD and the One Stop. Along the lines with those permits, the biggest hang up on permits is, say for example, I'm opening up a business at 123 Any Street, number 2, right? But your permit, whoever pulled your permit, your electrician or plumber, right? They pull it as 123 Any Street, right? So it doesn't have that suffix, that designation, that number, whatever. So that's not going to allow it to tie in. So you need to, get with your GC and hold their feet to the fire. Get with your plumber, get with your electrician, hold their feet to the fire, and make sure that they pull these permits correctly, right? And how you do that is when you call that customer engineering, you will get a letter of verification for your address. That is very important. That's going to set up your billing. That's going to set up everything. And just like a VIN number on your car, we develop a premise that everything's associated to that account. So we need to make sure that all that information, connects the dots, right? So that's very important. Now I'm going to talk about internal permits, right? So internal permits, you must take into account where you're going to buy this property. If you decide to go forward with gas, for example, where is that gas main? Is there gas available in that area? If you're going to bring electricity, over, are we going to be crossing a highway? Are we going to be, in a rule of thumb, if it's FM or IH, guess what we're going to need? TxDOT permit. TxDOT permits, they could take up to a month to get, as long as with some, as well as some historical permits, right? Cultural appropriations, they could take upwards to a month to get. So that needs to be factored in, again, when you're securing the building and waiting for certificate of occupancy and everything like that. You must consider the timelines. So standard duration for a line extension to CPS Energy, it's 40 days in the planning stage and then upwards to 30 days in construction. That's 70 days, 70 business days. So if you're buying a new building, make sure that you're accounting for those delays. And that's not to say that it will take 70 days, of course, right? But that's a standard duration because everybody has a certain thing to do, right, in the assembly line of your project. That's, environmental, that's right-of-way, that's permitting, whether it be a Bexar County permit, are we going to have to park in their right-of-way? Can all work be done inside the property? Is it going to be in TxDOT right-of-way? Stuff like that. So just do your due diligence. But the first thing to do, and I know it could be overwhelming, but the first thing to do is call that 210-353-4050. Go on our website, CPS Energy, look under Customer Engineering, fill out that application, send it in, and then a designer will be more than happy to walk you through that. And again, if you do have existing buildings or if you're looking for areas of improvement and stuff, you can also look us up on Energy to Business and see what kind of rebates. And I have Miss Julia Martinez here. She's one of our Energy to Business liaisons, and she's outstanding, fantastic, and we can definitely help you with any kind of rebates, programs, assistance that you guys need. And also just kind of check in because we do have these small to medium business fairs where we partner with nonprofits and help you guys secure construction loans, right? Secure business loans, and make it very equitable for everybody, right? And another thing is, we're here to keep the lights on. We're vested to the community. We've been vested to the community since 1860, right? It's a municipality, so it's city owned. There's a part that everybody forgets is that we are a nonprofit, right? And we give back to the community, right? So look on our website, especially on the E2B, on the small to medium businesses. There's going to be a lot of exciting stuff coming along. Our vision is to put together some focus groups to see how we can do our rebates and whatnot. And I'm going to turn it over.